Great, thank you. All right. Let's jump right into it with fusions. I'm going to share my screen here. Let me find. All right. So for fusions, we always start with reports. So essentially, we're going to fuse those reports together. And this could be for various different types of documents or things within the firm. Oftentimes, it's found for settlement statements. Some lit docs are often fusions, demands can be fusions, or I also see quite a few firms using report fusions when they have complex KPI reporting needs. So report fusions can be used for a wide variety of things, and they can be very helpful. They are a little bit complex to build and can be tricky at first, but once you get the hang of it and understand exactly what you're doing, they're very easy. At least I think they are. We will go to Report Builder to start off. And you'll notice here, I already have a couple that are built out, and I like to label them with fusion, what that fusion is, and then what the data is. And so these are my 4 reports here for this example as a settlement statement. And the reason we have so many reports is we'll often have a report for our static data. So that's always going to be our list of projects. And then any collection section that you're pulling data from will be its own separate report. And we'll go ahead and select. I think I used our QuickBooks project for those. So once you select your org, you probably only have one there. And your project type, hopefully you only have a handful there as well. This is our sandbox, so we have plenty. But you'll see those list of items. These are going to represent those collection sections in your project type. The reports themselves, you'll want to make sure that you're pulling in any data point that you'll need in your document. So for example, I can run my list of liens, and here right off the bat, we can see the columns that I have here is very limited. For liens, we don't need a ton. I have the project name. I did pull in the received date, so the final date or the date that we received that final lien ledger. The final lien amount before reductions, we have a field in our section that reflects the amount before reductions as well as the amount due after reductions. I often see firms that like to show that difference to the client just to reflect that they were negotiated on their behalf. Each report will have their own set of columns, of course, because they're not going to be the same. Like our liens and our expenses are different from our medical section. So for medicals, we would have the provider name, the amount, and probably also the amount after any write-offs, adjustments, anything like that have been made. And then for expenses, the breakdown of all cases, case costs that you have advanced on behalf of your client. Once we have all of those reports made, we will then go to our advanced menu and go to report fusion here down towards the bottom. We'll select our org. And then here, if you have fusions already created, I just clicked on this menu and those popped up. If you wanted to create a new one, you would click this green button. Go ahead and select your reports, just double clicking and moving those over. We'll select them for you and then giving it a name and clicking create. I already have one here for my settlement statement. And sometimes if you have a ton of fusions already created, sometimes it may not show in this menu. So simply just searching for the name that you're looking for, it will show up. So here's my settlement statement. I have my reports already selected over here. and I selected create. Once you do that, you'll be able to navigate to this template button here. And what we'll need to do is generate this default template. I am actually, let me open up some other things here so that I can share my whole desktop. I need to find my template. Okay, I'll share my whole desktop. All right, so when we generate this template, this is going to break out each of those reports that we created in Report Builder to its own sheet on this Excel file. So here we'll see we have our list of projects. The next sheet over is going to be our settlement section. The next sheet over, we have our meds, and then we have our liens. In this instance, when we need to build out a document, I guess let me say it this way. If you were to come to me and say you wanted me to build you a settlement statement, I would ask you for one that you've previously used with your own edits, your own liability paragraph, everything in it with the format that you like, your logo on it, and use that as my base template to copy these report codes into. Settlement statements oftentimes have a lot of little nuances. Each firm's that I've seen is designed a little bit differently, and it also comes down to your disbursement and settlement process. And what I mean by that is if you're doing lump sum disbursements or partial disbursements. And on that piece, I often hear that sometimes a firm might do partial disbursements, and I recommend entering those as a lien. And in your lien section, you have a lien type dropdown that is a settlement advance on behalf of the client from the firm. And then when you do your lump sum at the end, it'll show up and deduct itself. This is the template that I am working with. So here are going to be my fields that I'm pulling in. Let me make sure this is my right one. Settlement statement. I guess I could have downloaded this one too. Oh, it is the right one. Okay. So here I have this pulling from my collection insurance negotiations section, where each entry is going to be a settlement. So here, when I enter an item here as settlement, this is what's going to pull into my settlement statement. And I'll be able to see those line by line generate on my template here. So I could see when I have a liability in that carrier and the amount, as well as when I have my other claims, my first and third party will all show up here. Then we're going to sum that. We'll also pull in our attorney's fees and our case costs. And then down below, this is where we're going to pull in those providers and liens. So to copy and paste from our default template, there's a couple things to note. If we're pulling from a collection section and we need those repeating lines, we will have to use a note in Excel on that specific cell where the code will be housed to tell it essentially to begin my codes here and then end them here. And it's repeating. So we have a begin repeat and an end repeat here. Then we'll be able to copy paste those codes over. If, for example, in this instance, like client name, we don't need that to repeat for every line item. So that's going to pull from our static list of projects report. And you'll notice that 61 : in front of the client name. This is all pasted into one cell. And you'll see that here. We get that as the report ID pulling from Filevine. So we can find it when we go to our template. You'll notice, let me edit my note. There's a 61 right here at the end of the report name. That's how I know the report ID. It also displays when you're within Filevine here. We see the report ID after each report selected. That way we can also reference that here. So for the static data that only needs to display once in the given cell, we'll use that report ID and then : followed by the field name. We can see that a couple times throughout here. So we'll have the attorney's fees, as well as referral fees and sum of total costs. Down below, we also use it down here for the client name. We can also pull in the attorney name, whether that's from a case summary section assignment or the team section assignment. And we can also pull it into your liability paragraphs here. Let's see what else. Sometimes for these repeating fields in meds, for example, you might have an original balance or maybe just a final balance due, or one of both, but we're not capturing the individual amounts for the write-offs, adjustments, med pay. If the client made a payment or a reduction or anything like that, we can get kind of tricky with the placement of these codes and use an Excel formula to do the math for us and give us a subtraction to get the amount difference. I like to do that by copy pasting the field somewhere like this, for example, and oftentimes using the white text feature so that it's hidden. So sometimes if I'm building a statement, you'll see that, and you could hover over, let me actually do that again. If we're hovering over, just scanning through our cells, obviously with the white text, it doesn't show on the front end, but when we're on the cell itself, it'll show here. Let's see what else. I do oftentimes get templates that are formatted in Word, and I will always caution that I usually change those over to Excel. The reason is Word doesn't play so nicely with formulas. So here, when we're summing the amounts that would populate on this repeat, it wouldn't be able to do that very easy. And I promise that once we format this in Excel, it does actually print nicely. You don't see those grid lines. We can set the print area, and it looks like a regular document. So when you go to do this, you can save as a PDF, download it, send it to the client, and they would never know that it came from an Excel file. That is Report Fusions in a very quick nutshell. I ran through that kind of fast. Do we have any questions or specific things that you would want to see?
No questions have come in yet, but Zoe, it might be helpful. I know that you like already coded this out, but if you could show them how to like copy and paste from that other sheet over any tips and tricks that you have. I know making sure that you do have a static report is definitely one of them, because otherwise your static information has a difficult time pulling into the report or into the Fusion if you don't have that. So keep that in mind. And then I know Derek usually adds that in first. I don't know if you've seen that be a beneficial item, but any tips like that?
Yeah, There once upon a time, I wanna say I don't know if it was a rumor or not, but that the static report should be the top one selected here or entered. So, um, when you're double clicking over here to just put that at the top, I don't know. I think I do that out of habit, but not I don't know if not doing it would break it. That's a good point. Um, I always put it up first, I think, out of habit. How do I edit one by adding a new field? Oh, that's a good question. Hi, Paula. Um, let's see. So to add a new field to your Fusion, you would first need to edit the report that it's going to be on. So again, whether that's adding it to the static report or if it's in one of your collection sections, just editing that. If it exists in a new collection section, you would have to create a new report for that and get it added. Once you do add that new field, we would go and generate a new default template. And if you have yours already down or uploaded in here, we could download it, make an edit, and then replace that template. Let's go back here to copy paste those codes in the static section. So you would just need to add that field to your static report. And then it would be available on the template.
And then again, for the static reports, the report number has to be added before the field name. It's not going to show you that in the actual report that you're running. So you have to make sure that you add that in, and also the double colon.
Yep.
So both of those are required in order for the system to like be able to put it into the Fusion. So just make sure that you're noting that for this. What are those sections called? Collection sections. I don't know why
Collection.
I cannot think of that. You don't have to do as much kind of maneuvering. The report number, as I mentioned, is in that begin repeat item.
Yes, and I'll touch on that here. So for those static fields, just like Jasmine said, the report ID does not exist on the field name here within your template. So we would just copy paste, copy that code. And let me move this over here. Okay. So I'm going to paste that into this cell and then go back into it and edit. So there's going to be those two squiggly brackets at the front. I need to add that 61, the report ID, colon, colon, and then I could click enter and I'm done. So that's for all static field points or field selectors, field names. For the collection sections, depending on how you have yours formatted, you'll see that my cell sizes are different, and that varies based on template. But we'll go copy this temp or field name, and then we'll just copy this rental balance too. And put it here in the same row, just a couple fields over. Now we need to grab that begin code. And so I'm going to go over to the cell and you'll notice just hovering over it, it appears, but we need to copy it. So I'm going to right click, edit note, and then we'll be able to click into it, highlight and copy. We'll go to our template and go over that cell where the first code is entered. We could, in theory, put it here and it won't break anything, but just needs to be here. I did a right click again for new note. And now that I already have one created, it says edit. We can change the size of this. I'm going to delete my name and just paste that code in. Same concept for the end code. The repeat code there, I guess the begin repeat code is always going to be specific to that report. So it's going to contain the report name as well as the ID, whereas the end code is going to be the same for all of them. So in theory, we could copy paste this multiple times as we need to. We'll come back to this cell, new note, And again, we can move this too, since it's kind of cut off there. New note and repeat. And like I said, we could, if we had multiple rows, we could do that same thing and just paste it down. For the sum of these amounts, so you'll notice here I have G18 through G22, and you'll notice that I have 18 for my meds, 19 for my liens, and it actually goes down to 22 because I added these rows in. But if I delete that and come back, it'll automatically update. The reason for that, we want it to go one row after our last repeat. And it's going to sum everything that repeats, every line item until there's another blank row, essentially. Same concept for these settlement amounts, pulling from my settlement collection section. I have it summing G6 to G7. So G7 is my next blank field, and I want to get that sum. To do this, I always just do a sum function in my parentheses and then highlight both of those cells and click enter. I guess I should mention here, these cells are overlapping. That is just because the field names are long, but when you actually generate the document, it will not be that way. So just be cautious. And this is also just a part of the alignment. I have this one right side aligning versus if I were to move it to the left, it would overfill on this side as well. Lots of little formatting nuances, but like I mentioned in the beginning, as you do them and you can kind of start to envision what it'll look like and how you want your document to appear, it gets easier. And the biggest thing with the coding is try to envision what you're telling Filevine to do. So that's where that coding of including the report ID versus a begin and end repeat code. If I need it to pull from a static section or just a field name only one time, that is automatically going to tell myself I need it to pull from a static section and to be on my list of projects. Versus if I have a section, a collection section with multiple entries that I need to repeat being that keyword there, then we will need that begin, repeat, and end repeat note. Oftentimes, I also like to use a calculation in Excel to give me that formula for the percentage. I see sometimes firms will have a percent field in Filevine. Maybe it's not part of calculating the total fees that are going to be received, but more so just documenting that we took a 33 rather than a 40, or maybe we went to lit and we upped it to 40, whatever that may be. But I like to rely on Excel to calculate that for me. And you'll notice we're using G8 divided by H5. So G8 is going to take our total gross fees from our Filevine static section. And then H5 is going to be that total settlement amount. So I could put in and it'll calculate 8%. Okay. Any other questions?
I don't see any yet, but Zoe, you mentioned some other use cases for fusions. Can you maybe go over some of those? I know in our like admin project, we have a report dashboard. So if you have multiple project types, are you able to create a fusion to give you a better overall picture? Maybe going over something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. We could also go over, I think I forgot to mention, When doing a report fusion, the process to set that up is a little bit different from DocGens. DocGens, we need to house that widget or place that in a section first, and then go to DocGen setup and attach the document to that widget. Report fusions, we need to build the fusion first, and then in customs editor, we would go, I'm going to use our admin project for this instance. We, like Jasmine said, we have a report dashboard. We would need to place a report fusion template. I always recommend using the multi rather than the single. So when we add a widget, you'll see that here, report fusion, single versus multi. We would place that first, or if you have an existing one, that is a multi, we could add additional report fusion templates to it. And here is where you would select your statement. You can then also choose to limit data to current project. So this, for instance, if it's a settlement statement, we would of course want to only limit to that project, versus if it's a KPI type of reporting fusion, then we want to see all project data. So we would uncheck that box. Other instances here are our finance team has been working on time and billing fusions for their bookkeeping clients. So that is something that's been a use case. KPI report fusions, that's mostly in a report dashboard like this in our admin section is going to be for the firms that have multiple project types. And I say that because the report fusion, let me think how to explain this. So going back to my settlement statement example, if we're pulling data from a collection section and we need it to repeat, so I want to see all of my line items for settlement. In one document, like I have coded out in my template here, then that fusion cannot be generated within that section. I'll say that again. If I need to pull my line items from my collection section, each entry, I cannot generate that document within that section. That goes for demands as well. Sometimes we generate a demand in our insurance section or in our negotiate settlement section. Demands we could generate in an insurance section and pull data from meds as a repeating and liens as a repeating or expenses as a repeating. But if I needed to pull every line item or add an item entry into that collection section, I cannot generate the fusion in that section. And that's when we generate it in a static section. So oftentimes, if you tell me you are going to do a lump sum disbursement, you have a collection settlement section, I will tell you that the settlement statement needs to be generated in something like a case summary or a static section. If it's a, let me think of another use case. I've often seen firms, and I think I've created this for a couple firms, when you need to send out an LOR or an LOP to multiple providers, multiple insurance companies, oftentimes you're going to have to go into each collection entry, generate the document, and send it independently. I have used a fusion to create a one-page repeating document. So I take that LOR and I put my begin code in the header and my end code in the footer. And I have a yes, no kind of contingent field in the section that says use this for or include in my mass document production. So if it's yes, then it would work and pull in, or if it's no, it would not. And I would generate that in also a static section, and it would be able to give me that one pager for every single provider or insurance company that would apply to that criteria. Um, what else? Any other questions?
I'm trying to think of other like tips and tricks. I haven't done a ton of fusions, but I know that they're always definitely a hurdle. There's a learning curve for sure in them. And if you edit or make any changes to your template, that could impact your fusion. So just keep that in mind. I think Zoe kind of showed in Report Builder the naming convention, right? Fusion dash and then medical section or whatever it is. So you do want to make sure that anytime that you're using a report in the advanced tab or any place other than Report Builder, that you kind of indicate that so that it's a visual cue to you and kind of everybody else. That it's being utilized in other places and making edits to certain areas can impact that.
Yes. You can use the same report in multiple fusions, and that often comes into play to like for a settlement statement and a demand. For example, they're both going to need that same medicals, liens, expenses, insurance, that same data. So you can use the same report and again, just label it very specifically of what it's being used for. If it is being used in multiple, my example here of putting the fusion name settlement statement wouldn't necessarily apply. And I would just do fusion dash liens, for example.
How do you format the Excel document to look like a Word document?
That's a great question. Um, there's lots of nuances with this, and it comes down to the view that you're using on Excel. And the different settings of it. Generally, when you let me think. If we go to layout, we can do page setup, and then you'll be able to then see your header and footer here. If we go to, and that's what would allow me to put in a picture here as well. If I go to header, footer, and picture while I'm selected, it would prompt me to upload something. You'd likely want to have that as a PNG style document. For your margins, let me remind myself how I do this. View.
You deselected grid lines.
Yeah, where is that? Oh,
Right.
here, my checkbox. So under view, there's a checkbox here to remove the grid lines. Let's see what else. Edit. I apologize. I think I have done this a handful of times to put the margins on here, and then I kind of will rinse and repeat if I have a format with a margin I like and just go in and delete my codes and the language in it and replace it with the new.
Under page layout.
I was looking there. Oh, there it is, margins. Thank you, Jasmine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good at Excel, but the formatting is still new.
And Zoe mentioned print area. You'd also be able
Oh,
to
yes.
An area from this page layout.
Yes, you can do print area from here, set or clear. And then when you go to print, we can also do that from here as well. And usually your margin settings will cross over. Good question. I feel like there's a lot of different ways to format Excel as a Word doc. I don't think there's a wrong way. Paula, I wanted to mention if you could send me an email of which report fusion you're needing those reports for, I can share them with you. Just shoot me an email. Okay. Any other questions?
I don't see any, but just as a reminder, report fusions are an advanced kind of, God, words are just completely escaping me today.
Advanced tool.
Yeah. So you do have to be granted permission to be able to create these report fusions. So just keep that in mind. You have to be, somebody has to give you those kind of permissions. Are there no limitations with fusion report size or complexity?
I don't know of any known limitations. I have experienced where there can be too much data, or if I have too much data and I've had Excel kind of break on me actually when I've done a KPI fusion report just using multiple pivot tables and VLOOKUPs in Excel, that it can be kind of buggy. So I would try to keep it as simple as possible while still being effective for what you're trying to accomplish. I find that keeping it simple and not over complicating the amount of data or duplicate data that I'm trying to pull in makes it easier. I will also mention I'm kind of I don't know what the right word would be, superstitious that if I interrupt a report, so now that I selected this and it's running, if I interrupt this run cycle and I navigate to the criteria or the columns or the save and export tab here, that the report could potentially get bugged and break and stop working. And then if that happens, we have to recreate the report and essentially archive that existing one. So I'm kind of superstitious about that. I always advise letting it finish running. So when you see the data here, then you can navigate away from that menu or that window. Limitations of data size. I don't remember what the row count is that we start to see some issues, but it is up there.
I
Like
think it's in the
tens of
thousands.
yeah, tens of thousands rows. So it's up
But
there.
you should see that error in the like report too. Like reports aren't able to pull in
Yeah.
infinite amount of data. So you'll see it there too.
Yeah. 50 columns and 30,000 in rows. 50 columns. I know for Domo, we try not to go over 50 columns in one report. And 30,000 in rows could be right. I feel like I remember it's being a little higher than that. But that is a safe zone, I would say, to stay within those numbers.
Um, So just as a reminder, Vine skills can definitely help with Fusion. So if you're like, I can't even think about this, there's too many kind of areas we can definitely help. I put my email as well as Zoe's email in the chat so that if you do want to engage in our services, you can reach out and we can connect you with somebody that can kind of help with whatever needs that you have. We do all things Filevine and Filevine related. Zoe helps set up QuickBooks. So if you're like, we've been thinking about getting QuickBooks Connect and you have the online version, we can help get that set up. We can help you with Domo and all of the other things related to Filevine. On our website, there's optimization services that you can kind of take a look at if you want to dive in before you reach out to us, totally fine. But we're here to help if we can with whatever you all kind of need for that. Thank you, Zoe, so much for all of your knowledge. Hopefully this was helpful to you all. I will say that like Fusions have a wide range, as Zoe mentioned, of capabilities and functions and all of that good stuff. And if you're an Excel person, Fusions have even more capabilities. Like it opens several new doors because you can do VLOOKUPs and, you know, have helper columns that feed into other tabs. You can have multiple sheets within an Excel Fusion as well, where you're referencing kind of data and all of the stuff that Excel lets you do. So we just showed you a small portion of the capabilities, but they're vast. So if you're like, I just want to workshop if this is possible and then get some help, let us know, and we can kind of workshop with you all there. As always, thank you all so much for joining. We hope that you join a future free help session. And again, this recording will be up on our website by the end of the week. Have a good one. And thanks again, Zoe.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.